They thought he was just a poor, powerless farmer, easy to cheat, easy to crush, easy to forget. But what they didn't know was the man they threw out with nothing would return with a secret so powerful it would turn the town upside down, ruin every one of their lives, and crown him as the richest man the town had ever seen. The story begins in the small, dust-choked town of Woodvale, a forgotten stretch of land somewhere deep in rural Texas, where people still believed that wealth meant power, and power meant you could do whatever you wanted to those who had less. Daniel Carter was a humble, hard-working farmer, a man of the soil, with sun-beaten skin, rough hands, and the kind of quiet pride that comes from building something with your own two hands. His farm, Willow Creek Acres, wasn't much to outsiders, just a modest patch of land passed down from his grandfather. But to Daniel, it was his legacy, his blood, his life. That was until Vincent Hale came to town. Vincent wasn't born in Woodvale, but within a year, he owned half of it. A ruthless businessman with slicked back hair, a shark smile, and enough money to buy influence wherever he went. One by one, he started acquiring land, convincing or coercing small farmers to sell, and those who didn't mysteriously found their wells dry, their crops ruined, or their taxes doubled overnight. Daniel was the last holdout, refusing Vincent's increasingly aggressive offers, believing that no amount of money could replace his family's legacy. But Vincent didn't take no for an answer. One stormy evening, Daniel returned from town to find his home reduced to ash, his barns collapsed, and his fields mysteriously salted. The sheriff, an old friend now firmly in Vincent's pocket, showed up the next morning with eviction papers, claiming unpaid debts Daniel knew he'd never taken. In one brutal moment, Daniel was thrown off his land, left standing at the edge of town with nothing but the clothes on his back and the bitterness of betrayal thick in his throat. But life's storms don't last forever. And some men, when cornered, don't break, they sharpen. For the next 6 years, Daniel disappeared. Rumors swirled through Woodvale. Some said he drank himself to death in some other town. Others claimed he left for the oil fields, chasing fortune like every other desperate man. Vincent Hale, certain of his triumph, turned Willow Creek Acres into a luxury ranch, building himself a grand estate on the land he stole. The town grew under his control, businesses paid him quietly, and anyone who remembered Daniel was either too afraid or too beaten down to speak his name. Until one spring morning, a convoy of black cars rolled into town. Men in sharp suits, carrying briefcases and speaking with authority no one dared question, descended on Woodvale's bank, courthouse, and land registry office. At first, people thought it was the government come to audit Vincent's empire, but when the dust settled, it was Daniel Carter, no longer a farmer, but a multimillionaire businessman, standing taller than he ever had, eyes hard as stone, smile cold as winter. The man they'd thrown out had returned, and he hadn't come back for peace. The story of what happened during those 6 missing years, how Daniel went from a ruined farmer to the wealthiest man in the state, and what he planned to do to Vincent Hale, would soon unravel in ways no one in Woodvale could have ever predicted. And as Daniel bought up land, business by business, deed by deed, leaving Vincent powerless to stop him, the town began to remember what real justice felt like. The town of Woodvale was no stranger to whispers, but in the weeks following Daniel Carter's explosive return, those whispers turned to outright fear. No one knew exactly where he'd been or how he'd built his fortune, but they saw the signs everywhere. The rusted Woodvale Bank now bore a sleek news sign reading Carter Financial. The struggling hardware store was suddenly thriving under new ownership. And land after land that Vincent Hale once controlled was quietly changing hands, the deeds signed over to an anonymous corporation that, by now, everyone knew was Daniel's. Vincent, for the first time in years, felt something he'd long believed he was immune to: dread. The man he'd humiliated, ruined, and cast out had come back, and Vincent couldn't stop him. Every business partner Vincent approached pulled away, Every bank refused him loans, and the sheriff who had once evicted Daniel found himself stripped of his badge in a public scandal orchestrated with precision. Vincent's carefully built empire was collapsing from the inside, and no one was offering him a hand. What no one in town knew, not yet, was what Daniel had done in those 6 lost years. After the destruction of his farm, Daniel had wandered south, working odd jobs in oil fields and construction sites until a chance encounter with a reclusive, eccentric investor named Malcolm Cross changed everything. Malcolm, a self-made billionaire who believed in giving second chances, saw something in Daniel's fury and resilience. Under Malcolm's mentorship, Daniel learned the ruthless ways of finance, land development, and corporate warfare. He started small, flipping a piece of abandoned land into a profitable truck stop, then investing in oil drilling equipment rentals, then buying out bankrupt companies, slowly amassing a fortune. Malcolm, impressed by Daniel's natural instincts and quiet vengeance, staked him in a series of high-stakes deals that made Daniel rich beyond anything Woodvale could comprehend. And when Malcolm died, leaving Daniel as the primary heir to a fortune of over $200 million, Daniel knew exactly where he was headed next. Back in Woodvale, Vincent's paranoia was spiraling. One night, after a string of anonymous threats, a stone through his mansion's window, and his trusted accountant vanishing without a trace, Vincent cornered the mayor, demanding answers. But even the mayor was nervous, avoiding Vincent's gaze as he admitted that the town's council had already voted to approve Daniel Carter's proposal to redevelop half the town into a luxury residential and business hub, effectively stripping Vincent of any remaining influence. Worse, Vincent learned that Daniel was now the majority shareholder in every major business in Woodvale, leaving him broke in everything but name. That night, desperate and humiliated, Vincent confronted Daniel outside the town hall, hurling insults and threats in front of a silent crowd. But Daniel didn't flinch. He simply looked Vincent dead in the eyes and said, "You took my home, my family's land, and my pride. Now I'm taking your world." The final blow came days later when Daniel acquired the last piece of land Vincent owned. Ironically, the very mansion Vincent had built atop Willow Creek Acres. A public auction, attended by the whole town, saw Daniel place a single, final bid that nobody dared to outmatch. The gavel fell, and with it, so did Vincent Hale. The man who had once ruled Woodvale left town in shame, his fortune gone, his name spat upon by those he'd once controlled. But even with Vincent Hale gone, Daniel Carter wasn't finished. Because while revenge might be sweet, Daniel had learned something during those 6 long, bitter years away. Power without purpose is just another form of rot. And though Woodvale had watched Vincent's fall with a mix of fear and satisfaction, the town itself was still crumbling, its people still trapped under years of corruption, poverty, and broken promises. So Daniel, now the undisputed owner of nearly everything in town, did something no one expected. Instead of turning into another tyrant, he turned Woodvale inside out. He called for a public gathering in the town square, where the broken courthouse clock struck noon for the first time in decades. People gathered, curious, nervous, waiting to see what the man they once discarded would say. And in front of them all, Daniel made a promise not to rule, but to rebuild. He announced plans for new housing, fair rent prices, interest-free business loans for local farmers and shopkeepers, and scholarships for every child in Woodvale who wanted to study beyond the county. He revealed that the once corrupt town council had been replaced with a new board of locals chosen by popular vote, and the crooked sheriff had been replaced with a no-nonsense ex-Marine who pledged to keep the law fair. Daniel poured money into fixing roads, schools, and the long-dead hospital wing where his own father had died years before because no doctor could be found. And every bit of land he'd bought was offered back to the families who'd once owned it, free of charge, with new homes built where old ones had fallen. As for Vincent Hale, the town never saw him again. Rumors claimed he tried to start over in another city, only to be arrested for fraud. Some whispered that he'd vanished into the desert, a broken man with nothing but ghosts for company. But Daniel never spoke his name again. His victory wasn't in Vincent's downfall. It was in the rebirth of a town that had finally reclaimed its soul. The mansion Vincent had built, once a symbol of greed, was turned into an orphanage and community center, and Daniel moved into a modest farmhouse on the edge of town, rebuilt on the very patch of land where his grandfather had planted the first seed. Years later, Woodvale would be known not as a forgotten, dying town, but as a thriving community where no man's worth was measured by his wallet, and one man's fall had paved the way for everyone's rise. And though Daniel Carter became one of the wealthiest men in the state, he remained a farmer at heart, waking up before dawn, walking the fields, and never forgetting the day they threw him out of his own land. Because some men come back for revenge, and others come back to build a legacy so big, no one would ever dare tear it down again. And if you love this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this, and turn on the bell icon because trust me, the next one's going to be even wilder. Drop a comment below with your favorite part and let's talk about it.